Good evening, I'm Alan Jackson and welcome to Nashville. Summer in the nation's capital used to be the time to take a break and head to the Eastern Shore. Well, not this year, not even on weekends, because President Trump fills his schedule from sunup to long into the evening. And the rest of the city, they're running hard just to keep up. This week alone, there's been a potential deal with China, no deal with Iran on the nuclear talks, so American diplomats are being withdrawn from Iraq, as well as U.S. military family members across the Mideast. Immigration protests, put on mostly by paid socialist groups, they're spreading to more than a dozen U.S. cities where Trump has sent in troops to help keep the peace. Well, the latest economic news was good. Inflation is lowering, gas prices are down, all good stuff. And yet, amid all of that, President Trump found time to take the First Lady to the Kennedy Center, where a sold-out audience got into a competition between people who were booing him and others cheering for the president to drown them out. Well, as I said, there's no time for the beach just yet. And that includes Colin, the co-founder of South and Hill Strategies. His advice on how to navigate Washington sells at a premium. But tonight, we're fortunate enough to get his inside view. Welcome back, Colin.
Alan, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. There's not much to talk about, so I don't know where to start.
We'll find something. President Trump gives the phrase work productivity new meaning. Let's start with the budget bill, the one he calls big and beautiful. We're clearly in the window where every member of Congress wants to have his or her say on what they think must be in the bill. The question is, with such a small majority, do John Thune and Mike Johnson have the makings of something that will ultimately pass, even with some members insisting that they can't vote for the bill as it currently stands? What do you think?
I think it's important to remember a couple of things, Alan. One, this big, beautiful bill, when you break it down, this is the vehicle. This is the way that all those things President Trump talked about in the campaign trail last year that resonated so much with voters. Things like no tax on tips, things like no tax on overtime. Most importantly of all, the extension of his 2017 tax cuts, which, if left unaddressed, they all go away at the end of this year. Everyone wakes up on New Year's Day, 2026, with a huge tax hike. This is the way to get all of those done. And it is a big, beautiful bill. It contains a lot of things that the president promised he would do. And that, frankly, Speaker Johnson, guy's got a tough job. The narrowest of margins. He's pulled a rabbit out of his hat a number of times over the course of his speakership. He did it again with this bill. Now it goes over to the Senate. Is it perfect? Probably not. Is there more spending that could be cut? Sure. But I think it's important to remember we didn't get into the spending deficit overnight, and to think we're going to fix it in one fell swoop is unrealistic as well. But it takes important steps in the right direction. And most importantly of all, conservatives used to believe, and still do believe, that if you unshackle the economy from some of the burdensome regulations that the previous administration put on it, that growth is what will kickstart and jumpstart the opportunity and the upward mobility that the president talked about in the campaign trail.
Well, even in this moment of party unity, there are Republicans who want more cuts in the budget and others who want to let the taxpayers keep more of their income. Here's how Senator Rand Paul put it.
I will vote for spending cuts. The more the better. This is very, very small. To put it in perspective, if the deficit this year is $2.2 trillion, if you cut $9 billion, the deficit's going to be $2.191 trillion. It really doesn't materially change the course of the country. We should do it by all means, and it is the low-hanging fruit. This is the money that was pointed out that was being spent for sex change operations in Guatemala, trans opera in Colombia, all this crazy spending. Yes, it should be cut.
You know, I think most people agree with that, but one of the problems is that there are different estimates of what the new budget would do to the deficit. The CBO estimates $2.6 trillion through 2034, and the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimates $3.1 trillion. It's pretty hard to keep everyone happy when you can only work with competing estimates, isn't it?
That's right. These numbers fly around and they've got so many decimal points after them. It's hard for anyone to really figure it out. Look, Senator Paul's a principled guy. He's someone who believes deeply and strongly in cutting the size, scope, and government, and that's a laudable goal, and that's one that he deserves credit for standing by. I also heard in that answer, Alan, basically him saying between the lines, not letting perfect be the enemy of the good. Does he wish this bill went further? I'm sure he does. My guess is ultimately he'll come along, he'll come around at the end of the day, because this is, again, this bill can't fail. We heard about too big to fail during the banking crisis in 2008. This is too important to fail. And there is just too much here for the Republican Party and these two chambers of Congress they control to let the president's key initiative go down in flames. So ultimately, Senator Paul, others may want to work around the edges to make this bill better. That's great. That's all part of the legislating process. The sausage making can be ugly. It can be something that people scratch their heads at and wonder what's going on. It's all kind of part of the deal. But I also remind people that when President Biden in his term, his version of this was that so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which, by the way, didn't reduce inflation. But that's it. That was his landmark legislative achievement. That didn't happen until the midway through the second year of his presidency. So President Trump, the fact that he's got this thing as close to the finish line as it is, there's still a long way to go, but it's looking good, and that's important, because when this thing gets done, Alan, when this bill passes and is signed as law, those 2017 tax cuts, all of which are set to expire, they get reauthorized, and every small business, every mom and pop shop in this country can say, "Woo, okay, I'm not going to get slammed next year with those taxes. Let me go reinvest. Let me go figure out how to give my employees back some of their money. Let me go figure out how I can expand." That certainty is going to be just the rocket fuel that this economy is looking for.
Well, there's another roadblock to the economic success the president has in mind. It's the liberal judges who are trying to hold up much of what he's doing. You know, there was a victory this week when an appeals court ruled that the new tariffs could stay in place, at least for now. Do you think if the tariffs prove to be effective for businesses here, they'll prove to be a winning issue for Republicans?
Well, we'll see. The jury's still out on the tariffs. One thing is clear. This is something the president's been talking about both during and well before his time in government. The fact that he did tariffs, took some people by surprise, but it shouldn't have, because he promised to do this. And I guess maybe it's surprising to see someone in elected office doing what they said they were going to do. But between cracking down on illegal immigration, getting tough on the border, unleashing American energy, and implementing these tariffs, these are all things the president said he was going to do. I think the jury's still out on the success of them. But as it relates to the original question here about the judicial system, look, it's ironic, because one of the crowning achievements of President Trump's first term, in fact, one of the reasons he got elected, was because he promised to appoint conservative judges. He did that. And many of these judges, he just reshaped the judiciary for generations to come, and it will outlast his presidency, and it'll be one of, if not his, crowning achievements. Most of all, of course, the Supreme Court and the 6-3 conservative majority that President Trump, implemented there. So I know he's frustrated. He and his administration are frustrated with some of the setbacks they're seeing along the way from the judges. I also think it's important. It speaks to the bigger issue is, as many of these important priorities that he wants to get done, pass them by law. There's Republicans control both chambers of Congress. Too often now, and politicians of both parties are guilty of this, we govern by executive orders, we govern by fiat. You pass laws, Alan, you do it the old school, old-fashioned way. That's a lot harder for subsequent administrations to get rid of. So that will be the way. We've got this narrow window right now. Republicans control both houses of Congress. Pass as many of these things into law as you can. It'll be a lot harder for future administrations or judges to do away with them.
Well, Colin, stay with us for another segment. In the meantime, you may want to check out our new landing page, ajnow.com. All the shows are there on every subject. You can also send us emails with your thoughts on what you'd like us to cover. We're celebrating our first year on the air this month, and we would love it if you would share the site or some video clips with friends. Help us spread the truth. We'll all be better for it. I'll be right back. Well, we're back now with Colin Reed, the co-founder of South and Hill Strategies. Let's move to immigration. It was the top issue in the election, but what's happened since then is chaos. The Democrats ginning up protest for the cameras, and the president coming down hard with the National Guard and Marines trying to keep the peace. In pure political terms, the overwhelming majority of the American public, they're siding with the president. People want to feel safe. There's up to 20 million people here illegally. Do you think this will prove to be an issue for candidates in the midterms and in 2028 as well?
Kind of feels like we've seen this movie before, Alan. The media, the mainstream media, and Democrats and liberals telling us that these protests are peaceful, while these cars go up in flames, Molotov cocktails get hurled around, and some of these once proud American cities just kind of fall by the wayside. And it's sad to see. But never underestimate the modern left's ability to stand on the side of those here in the country illegally versus those just wanting safety and peacefulness in their neighborhoods. And it's just they still haven't learned their lesson. You see Gavin Newsom out there, the governor of California. He so badly wants to run for president in 2028. Maybe this will help him get ahead of the pack in the crowded primary. But in terms of the general election, this is not a close issue. People don't like what's happening. They don't like seeing these foreign flags being held atop burning cars in America's second largest city. And look, I don't really think President Trump wanted to use the military. I don't think it was something he sought to do, but I also don't think he's going to stand idly by and just let this city fall. So it's a conundrum the Democrats are in. It's funny, we talk about this, and we've talked about it when you and I have been on talking on the show before. It still seems like even though we're here 8 months removed from the election last year, we're still very much living in the throes of it. It's like the Democratic Party has not learned their lessons or figured out a way forward. And they're still just in this political doom loop where they're just continuing to make the same mistakes they made before without learning a lesson or moving forward.
Well, you mentioned California's governor, Gavin Newsom. You know, he's rolled out his predictable instinct, a big lie about the president. Listen to this one.
If some of us could be snatched off the streets without a warrant, based only on suspicion or skin color, then none of us are safe. Authoritarian regimes begin by targeting people who are least able to defend themselves, but they do not stop there. Trump and his loyalists, they thrive on division because it allows them to take more power and exert even more control.
You know, Newsom says the president, and I quote, is fanning the flames by sending troops to Los Angeles. The only thing he seems to be trying to fan is his own interest in running for president. Colin, how does protecting gang members and illegal criminal citizens become a winning issue for him? Is that even possible?
That's right. Well, that's right, and it's a winning issue in a Democratic primary because they're so far detached from just the concerns and reality that most everyone else is living in, and that's the political reality they have to live in. And it's just so far where the Trump administration likes talking about these 80-20 issues. And what they mean by that is they pick issues, they take very hard stances on issues where the 80% of the country agrees with them, and let the Democrats fight it out for the other 20%. And this falls into that camp as well. And it's an issue where it's not even a close call. And we saw this earlier this spring. This isn't the first time this played out. We saw all those Democrats rush to defend the human trafficker who was the quote unquote Maryland man who was deported to El Salvador. We saw Senator Van Hollen from Maryland go down there and allegedly drink margaritas with him. And it's just this willingness to put themselves on the sides of people who are in this country illegally and thus have broken a law over people who are here trying to live their lives in peace. It defies all expectations and norms.
You mentioned the judiciary a moment ago, and it's bewildering to a lot of us, these local judges who keep trying to get in the way of the president's agenda. Now, there was a lot of enthusiasm when President Trump returned to the White House, but I don't think we anticipated that local judges actually had the power to stop the president. Do these delays take any of the enthusiasm away from the voters, especially those who will be needed by the party in the midterms?
Well, it certainly gives the president something to run against, but at the same time, he also wants to get his agenda across the finish line. If history's any guide, the midterms are not usually kind to the party in charge. Maybe history will defy itself this time, as it has in President Trump in the past. But it's a safe assumption to believe now is the time to get things done. Now is the time for legislating, because this time next year it's hard to believe we're going to be in the thick of campaign season again, and all the action will have shifted away from Capitol Hill and the halls of Congress and out into the election. So he's got to figure out a way to get around these judges, and more than just a rallying cry, more than just stirring the base, because if they are blocking progress, that's a real problem. And I think that's one thing that his administration, they hit the ground so fast this time around because they've done it before. And that's one thing they've got to figure out quickly, because otherwise we risk squandering precious time.
Well, there was a lot of excitement on Wall Street when the president came back from his Mideast trip with trillions of dollars of commitments to invest in our country. You know, obviously, it'll take time to build out the factories and put the help wanted signs out. Is this a potential long-term winning issue that Republican candidates can get behind for the midterms?
Well, it's clear the president believes in peace through commerce, and he believes that these countries who are doing business with each other, it makes it a whole lot harder for them to go to war with each other. And this is someone who's been very clear and consistent from the beginning that he wants this Ukraine-Russia war to come to an end. And part of his trips to the Middle East recently was to get everyone on the same table in terms of doing business with each other, and that will hopefully instill a little more stability in an unstable part of the world. So look, the jury's still out, but some of these things that when the history books are written in terms of how they're viewed, it's very possible that these first, and there's so much activity happening at all times, it can often be it can be easy to lose sight of what's going on. But this presidency is one that will live on, and the historians and the political scientists will be studying for some time to come.
Well, Colin Reed, thank you for joining us again today. Come down to Nashville this summer. We'll put you on set.
I love that, Alan. Great to be with you. Talk to you soon.
All right. Up next, my thoughts on where we go next. It's a hopeful look ahead. You know, I'm grateful for the leadership shown by President Trump and his team during this time of lawlessness and violence in cities across the U.S. Certain politicians and legacy media members label Trump as a tyrant and his administration as an authoritarian regime. Well, the Trump administration is focused on ensuring law and order remains in our communities. That's a good thing. I'm grateful for their efforts, for their unrelenting energy. You know, it seems to me like every morning they attack the day as if it's a brand new day and their first day on the job. But I have a concern. If we as Christ followers don't match their energy with a commitment to change in our own hearts, then I don't believe what they're initiating is sustainable. You know, it reminds me of something that I have seen many times. I've walked through difficult diagnoses with people, those who have been told that they have cancer, some serious disease, and doctors come in with treatment protocols and regimens, sometimes surgeries, removal of tumors, even chemotherapy. And often there are some remarkable victories over the disease. But if the cancer isn't completely removed and it returns, it often comes back with a vengeance, worse than what the original diagnosis seemed to be. Well, I would suggest to you that we're in a similar place now. President Trump and his team are addressing evils that have taken root on our watch. We were too busy, too distracted, for whatever reason, to speak up and to act. And now we've given the Trump administration permission to enforce the laws that were largely ignored and introduce change. But we have to match that change. We have to reflect it in our own lives. We need to go back to our churches, open our Bibles, return to the fundamental principles of character that made our nation great to begin with. Let's choose to respond like Joshua and Caleb, who said, "We believe the Lord will complete what He has begun in us." Let's use our voices and our influence so that the name of Jesus might be honored once again in the public square, so that there can be peace in our streets and a hunger for God in our schools and universities. If we'll do that, I believe God will help us. I believe God will bless America again. I'll be back with your emails in just a moment. Stay with us. Hey, before we get to your emails, let me just remind you that you can go to ajnow.com. There's an archive of all the programs. You can share the ones you've liked with your friends. Enlist some friends to watch with us. It'll help a lot. There's even a newsletter there you can sign up for and keep up with all the information of what you're seeing and even a little bit behind the scenes. Judy B. in California emailed, "Pastor, I know you have a heart for the Jewish people. I do too. My father was Jewish. I worship a Jewish Messiah. I'm so angry with the hunting and attacking of Jews in this country. I pray about it, but I still find it absolutely despicable. What can we do?" Well, Judy, I think it's as simple as this. We use our voices. We do it in the congregations where we worship to be sure we have a biblical understanding of the debt we have for the Jewish people. And then we use our voices in our community. Speak up on behalf of our Jewish friends and neighbors. They are a strength in our nation, and we are obligated to them. The covenant they have honored with the Lord has brought God's blessings to every one of us. MJ from New York asks, "Can you please explain the difference between tithes and offerings? When we were able to attend a church, we were often told tithes are for the local church that feeds you, and everything else is an offering. What is your understanding?" Good question. You know, the tithe, as I understand it, means a tenth, and that first tenth of what we have belongs to the Lord. It's introduced in the Old Testament, but it really predates the Mosaic covenant. So I think the first tenth of everything we earn belongs to the Lord. And I typically think the tithe belongs to the place where you're spiritually fed, the place you would go for ministry if you got news you never wanted to get. An offering is simply the gifts we give to the Lord beyond our tithes. You know, the more affluent we become and the more opportunities we have, a tithe is really a small investment in the kingdom of God. Most of us can do far more than that. Carol B. from Lacey, Washington said, I very much enjoy your half-hour show on TBN every evening. How refreshing to hear someone addressing the issues that we're facing. Regrettably, very few churches are doing this. Well, I agree, Carol. The churches have been a bit reluctant, but I see a number of hopeful signs that leadership in churches across the country are finding the courage to begin to address our current events. We've got to do that. We can't just be historians with the theoretical theology. Thanks for the reminder. Well, I'm Alan Jackson. Thank you for sharing a few minutes with us, and I pray you have a wonderful evening.